I once thought the worst thing in life was losing my wife, until the day I discovered my own daughter and son-in-law were plotting to strip me of my assets and throw me out of the house I'd poured my blood into building. They wanted me to sign transfer papers, forge medical records, and label me a senile old man to make me easier to manipulate. But they didn't know I'd been recording every word, every scheme, every phone call for a long time. And when I turned the tables at the courtroom, amidst Sean's stunned gaze and Evelyn's collapse, I realized life can take everything from you, except the clarity and dignity I reclaimed with my own hands. I was sitting at the head of the table, a plate of steaming ribs in front of me, when I heard Sean speak, his voice lower than usual, as if meant only for Evelyn. Your dad's getting old. If we speed up the asset transfer, we can invest before next month. I didn't look up right away. The neighbors' dogs barked in the distance. Silverware clinked on plates, and Evelyn just gave a soft laugh and poured more wine for both of them. The kitchen was bathed in the gentle glow of the chandelier and the smell of freshly baked garlic bread, which she always said brought back childhood memories. But in that very light, Sean's words landed like a heavy stone in my chest. No one knew I heard, or if they did, they thought I didn't understand. I sat still, my eyes fixed on the clear glass windows overlooking the backyard where Evelyn and I once built a small wooden playhouse when she was in 3rd grade. The dining room wall was lined with wedding photos, vacation snapshots, and her college diploma, all featuring me. But in the more recent ones, I was fading, just a blurry shadow in the corner of the frame. Sean served Evelyn more cold cuts, his hand flashing the new watch I'd paid for in installments over 6 months. We've been thinking about simplifying the ownership, he said, a bit louder now, turning to me with a fake smile. So you don't have to deal with complicated paperwork anymore. We could take over the title for convenience. I nodded slightly, reflexively, pretending to focus on the mashed potatoes. Since moving in with me, Sean had grown used to saying things that sounded helpful but were really about control. I remembered the day she first brought Sean home. He shook my hand firmly, but his eyes never met mine. Want some more sauce, Dad? Evelyn asked, her eyes gleaming with a concern I no longer trusted. I smiled, shook my head. Inside, something cracked, not because their words were such a shock, but because they confirmed something I'd vaguely felt for a long time. In their eyes, I was no longer a father, but something to manipulate, an asset to be dealt with. Outside, the November wind swirled dry leaves around the porch where I used to read when Maria was still alive. Sean's voice rose again, this time to Evelyn. I sent the draft contract. Just need Dad to sign, and we're done. I set my fork and knife down, very slowly. I heard her soft laugh, the clink of glasses like a farewell toast, and in that moment, I knew a new chapter of my life had begun, and I would be the one holding the pen, writing every line, every word, every sound, even the ones they didn't know I'd recorded. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and comment where you're watching from. Let me know what time it is where you are. This didn't start tonight. It began years ago, quietly like a crack under the perfect paint of a house. I still remember the first time Evelyn brought Sean home to introduce him. He wore a crisp white shirt, hair neatly combed, spoke politely, but his eyes were too quick to scan every detail of my house. He complimented the walnut flooring I'd installed myself, asked about the price of the speakers I used for classical music, and gasped when he saw the antique clock on the wall I'd bought for my 30th anniversary with Maria. I'm such a fan of valuable stuff like this. You've kept it in great shape. Evelyn looked at him with pride, while I forced a polite smile, but a chill ran down my spine. I brushed it off like one might dismiss a slight joint pain in the cold season, thinking it'd pass or wasn't worth worrying about. I thought, as long as my daughter was happy, I could tolerate any discomfort. When Maria died of cancer, Evelyn wasn't even 30 yet. She sobbed on my shoulder at the funeral like a 4-year-old. After that day, we lived together for a while, quietly, full of memories, silent dinners, evenings when Evelyn read her mother's handwritten letters, and I stayed up all night checking locks, listening to the wind pass through the porch where Maria used to grow rosemary. Evelyn promised, Dad, I won't let you be alone. I believed her then. I believed like a father who never doubts the daughter he raised with everything he had. Evelyn was my everything. I once worked 2 jobs at the same time just to pay her tuition, mornings as a construction supervisor, nights driving a delivery truck for a small company. I remember one winter when snow reached my knees, I still delivered the last load on time to cover her junior year tuition. Every time she called from college in Oregon, I said I was fine, hiding the times I fainted from low blood pressure, fell off a ladder at work, or had headaches so bad I was bedridden for days. I thought, as long as she could study, could live well, I could bear any hardship. Then she graduated, got a stable job, and met Sean, a man who always knew how to make things sound like a big opportunity. When Evelyn said she wanted to marry him, I only asked one question. Are you sure? She nodded without hesitation. I didn't ask more. I just booked the venue, paid for the band, bought the wedding dress she wanted even though it cost 3 months of my salary, and told Maria through her photo on the table that our daughter had truly grown up. After the wedding, Evelyn and Sean moved in with me for a few months to save money. That savings stretched into nearly 3 years. Sean didn't like me brewing coffee in the morning because he said the smell gave him headaches. Evelyn told me not to leave things around the kitchen because Sean liked everything clean. I gradually retreated to a corner of my own house, living like a tenant in the place I'd built with my blood and bones. When they moved out, I helped with the deposit for their new place. Sean said he'd pay me back later, but never mentioned it again. Evelyn always smiled lightly and said, "We'll figure it out once we're settled, Dad." Every sum I sent for Sean's startup, their new home's expenses, the computer Evelyn needed when she changed jobs, came from my retirement fund. I never asked for it back because giving was a father's instinct. But then small signs started piling up. Sean lying about investments, Evelyn avoiding my eyes when I asked about money, family dinners becoming rare. I became the person only called when they needed a signature or a driver for a doctor's visit. And then tonight, sitting at the familiar dining table, hearing Sean talk about speeding up the asset transfer, I realized it wasn't that I'd lost my daughter, but that my daughter had traded me away long ago. The only difference was, I never recorded my sacrifices, but now I did. Now I recorded everything. And when the time came, every word in this house, every number, every shady plan would become evidence. Not for revenge, but to remind them, I'm still here, and I haven't fallen yet. I started noticing small details after Sean texted me to borrow the house keys while I was at the market. "Can you send the safe code? I need to grab the warranty for the cabinet we installed," he wrote. I hesitated, but sent it. Just furniture paperwork, I told myself. But that night when I got home, I found the filing cabinet slightly ajar, and the folder with the property deed was messily tucked at the back. I said nothing. I just quietly checked all the documents, put them back in the safe, and changed the code. I also started noticing how Sean spoke to me, like I was someone who needed guidance, someone who didn't understand technology, someone overwhelmed by financial paperwork. "You should let me co-own for safety," he said once during dinner. Evelyn looked at me persuasively. "Sean's just worried about you. If something happens, it'll make things simpler." I smiled, neither nodding nor shaking my head. In my mind, something was quietly shifting, like the sound of wheels crunching on thick snow. I started carrying a small recorder, one-button operation in my shirt pocket. At first, just in case, but soon it became a habit. Every conversation with Sean I recorded, missing nothing. I listened back at night in my room, earbuds in, every sound clear as if he were sitting next to me. "He's old, still trying to control assets like he's young," he said to someone on the phone, thinking I was napping. "Just be a little clever and everything will be in our names within 6 months." I pressed pause, sat silently in the dark room. No sadness, no anger, just something cold and solid in my chest. I felt like a hunter, patient, careful, waiting for the prey to show its tail. But I said nothing. I still ate meals with them, drove Evelyn to her checkups, let Sean borrow the car when he said, "My car's broken, can I use yours for a few days?" But I started noting the mileage when I handed over the keys. I logged dates, times, destinations. I dug up old documents, copies of investment contracts, handwritten receipts for money I gave Sean, old bank statements I kept out of habit, as Maria used to say. A careful man doesn't fear anyone turning on him. Every night, I organized files in my room, sorting them by month, by transaction type. The room started to look like an accounting office, and I felt more at ease among the papers than with my own flesh and blood. Evelyn started showing irritation. "You don't need to write down everything, Dad. Just rest," she said when she saw me typing a list of monthly expenses. Sean smirked. "You're such an old-school guy, always needing it in black and white to feel secure." I just smiled. He didn't know that because I was old school. I understood their new tricks were no different from the old ones, just wrapped in modern words. One afternoon, Sean came home unusually early. I was replacing the furnace filter in the basement when I heard him on the phone, his voice low but echoing through the air ducts, clear enough for me to catch every word. No need for notarization. Just forge it like the old template. He won't read the fine print. Besides, who hires a lawyer when they're that old? I didn't leave the basement. I waited for him to go upstairs, then crawled out of the dark corner, still holding the unscrewed screwdriver. I stood still for a long time, then pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. I'd set it to auto-record when I entered the basement. His voice was there, time-stamped, location tagged. I saved the file, named it Basement Furnace, Sean Day 12, and stored it in a password-protected folder with Maria's birthday as the key. The signs kept piling up, strange credit card bills in Evelyn's name sent to my address, bank calls I didn't recall making, even an email confirming a life insurance policy in my name, but with Sean's phone number. I quietly printed everything, filed it away. When Evelyn called me paranoid, I just smiled because I knew I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing for the day when pretending was no longer possible. I once believed Sean was a good husband because my daughter chose him, but now I understood. Sean didn't choose her for love. He saw value, and so did I. In his eyes, I was old value, untransferred assets, ownership to be reassigned. But he forgot one thing. I'm not just an old man with dusty memories. I'm the one who built this house with my bare hands, and I'm building a new one with evidence, data, and deadly silence. I've talked to a lawyer, Evelyn told me, one sunny Saturday morning in the kitchen, its white surfaces gleaming from the marble countertop I'd helped pay half to renovate. She held a pale green smoothie, hair tied high, wearing the cream wool sweater I'd bought for her last birthday. Sean stood nearby, eyes on his laptop, but voice clear enough. Dad, we know this is sensitive, but we really think it's time to consider setting up an asset trust. I set the newspaper down, careful not to clench my hands. What kind of trust? Revocable living trust, Sean said, looking up with an expert's smile. We've drafted one. Of course you can still make changes. But the idea is if you transfer the house, investment accounts, and some fixed assets to the trust now, when something happens, no one has to deal with probate. Evelyn nodded. I asked my friend, her family did it already. Vietnamese folks shy away from this stuff, but it's better to do it early. I looked straight into her eyes. For the first time in months, I really looked at my daughter and saw not concern, but impatience to remove an obstacle. Who'd be named on the trust? I asked. Evelyn and Sean glanced at each other. Then Evelyn said, You'd set it up, of course, but Sean and I would co-manage, just to help you if anything happens. Sean chimed in, his voice slick as oil. You'd still have full control while you're alive. Sell the house, buy something, withdraw money, totally fine. It's just precaution. Precaution for what? I asked, my voice slow and heavy. Evelyn bit her lip. Sean smiled again. No one can predict health issues, Dad. You're 70. A fall could mess everything up. If the assets are already in the trust, we can handle things temporarily without legal blocks. Temporarily, I repeated. What if I recover? You take it all back. No problem, Sean said quickly. You trust us, right? I chuckled softly. No more doubts, just confirmation. This was a well-rehearsed play. Evelyn's subtle hints weeks ago about sorting papers early. Sean's buzzwords like simplify for you, manage on your behalf, risk prevention, and especially how they both showed up. One gentle, one persuasive, like they were performing a well-meaning tragedy. I looked at the folder they placed on the table. Brown leather cover, a law firm's logo prominent in the corner. I recognized the firm, a place specializing in elderly asset transfers Sean had mentioned before. They'd prepared thoroughly, so had I. I took the folder, flipped a few pages, pretending to read closely. I need time to think, I said, nodding slightly. Evelyn beamed. Of course, Dad, no rush. Sean feigned calm. Sooner is safer, but it's up to you. I nodded, took the folder to my room, closed the door, locked it. I pulled out my phone, connected Bluetooth to the tiny recorder hidden in the lamp base. The entire conversation was captured, crystal clear. I saved the file, labeled it Trust Talk Day 15. I pulled out each page of the folder, photographed them, and sent them to Dale Martinez, the lawyer I'd quietly met 2 weeks earlier. A former prosecutor, now running a private firm specializing in family disputes with fraud red flags. He texted back 10 minutes later. Standard trust, but with clauses that could harm the grantor if declared incompetent. Be careful, don't sign anything. I replied, haven't signed, just acting. That evening, Evelyn brought grilled salmon to my room, feigning care. Have you eaten, Dad? We got your favorite from the market. I thanked her, ate a few bites for show. Sean sat in the living room watching CNBC, feet propped on the oak table I'd built. His eyes stayed on the screen, but I knew he was tracking my every step. Their play was nearing its end. They didn't know I held the script, didn't know I was rewriting the ending. I picked up my tea, sat in the armchair, turned on the TV like a proper old man. But in my mind, every action, every word, every trace was being strung together like a report I'd written for 40 years as an accountant. The only difference was, this time, the audit target was my son-in-law, and he'd misreported far too much. A week after their trust performance, Sean started showing impatience. He no longer hid his probing looks when I sat quietly in the living room, flipping through old bills. Evelyn was softer than usual, often bringing hot tea or suggesting, "Want me to help organize your files, Dad?" I just smiled, said I'd do it later. But inside, I was piecing together the scattered fragments into a complete picture, one where I wasn't a loved father, but an economic target planned for exploitation. Every night when the house fell silent, I sat at my desk with a stack of files up to my chest. I reviewed every bank transfer from the past 10 years, all the loans, emergency support, deposits, helping with shopping from my retirement account, savings, credit cards, Total over $620,000. I went through every email Sean sent requesting transfers. Strange accounts appeared. Digital Holdings LLC, Equivest Futures, Creststone Limited, all short-term investment firms, many existing for just 1 year. I looked up each company in the business registry. Some were shut down. Some listed Sean as the owner, but with a legal representative I didn't recognize, yet the address matched his old apartment. Each discovery was noted, printed, marked in red. I had no more doubts. Sean wasn't a failed businessman. He was a calculated con artist. And Evelyn? I wanted to believe she was innocent. But the deeper I dug, the more her fingerprints appeared. An email from Evelyn to Sean 3 years ago, titled IRA Transfer, read, "Dad doesn't need to know. I told him it's for our investment." Another printout, a co-signed mortgage application from a bank. Evelyn as primary, Sean as co-signer. The $85,000 loan. I thought it was for their home repairs was actually for rapid real estate investment. Not a cent came back. I sat silently for a long time after reading those papers. It wasn't raging anger, but a dull, aching pain like being cut with a blunt knife. They didn't just take my money, they took the trust I'd placed in the last person I believed in. From my desk drawer, I pulled out Maria's old notebook. Its leather cover was faded, but her purple ink was still clear. If one day you don't know who to trust, start by trusting yourself. I rested my hand on those words as if I could touch her voice. Maria always saw through people. She didn't like Sean from the first meeting. But I, in the emptiness of losing my wife, clung to Sean as hope for Evelyn, that she'd at least have someone, a family, happiness. Now I understood. I'd used my fear of loneliness as a measure of trust, and they exploited exactly that. That night, as I went to the kitchen for water, I heard Sean on the phone from the back porch. He hasn't signed yet, but I think he's close. He's old, won't read the fine print, just needs a bit more pressure. His voice was low but clear enough. Yeah, the protecting assets for the next generation line works great. He softens right up. I stepped slowly toward the back door. No sound, no breath betrayed me. As I leaned near the door, one last sentence hit me like a blade. Once the trust is in hand, I'll handle it all. Sell the house, liquidate, transfer everything to the new company. He won't know a thing. I wasn't angry. I just stood silently for a moment, then went back inside. Opened the remote recording app. The tiny mic under the wine rack was still working perfectly. I saved the file, named it Sean Back Porch Plot. Then I sat at my computer, entered the password, and opened an encrypted email to Lawyer Dale. I attached all copies of transactions, recordings, and document photos. In the email, I wrote a single line. "We have enough pieces. Time to put them together." I hit send, then sat still. The bedroom light spilled into the long hallway lined with family photos. In the largest one, Maria had her arm around me. Evelyn stood in the middle, smiling brightly. I suddenly realized, that smile, I wasn't sure anymore if it was real. Maybe it was just part of the play they performed so well, so cleverly that I forgot to doubt. But every play has its final act, and I, the man who once thought family could redeem anything, was ready to bring down the curtain with all the evidence in hand. That morning, it rained, not heavily, just enough for the maple leaves in the backyard to stick to the window, leaving smeared brown-red streaks like marks of time. I was pouring coffee when the landline rang. Strange, no one called it anymore except for ads or the old bank where I kept a savings account. I picked up, said nothing. A few seconds of silence passed before Sean's voice came through, hurried and urgent. "Hello? Yeah, it's me. No, he hasn't signed yet, but I think this week we'll get it. I'm planning to ramp up the pressure." I held my breath. He thought he'd misdialed to a partner. I pressed the receiver to my ear, not daring to make a sound. Yeah, I slipped the necessary documents into the packet sent back from the law firm. This time it includes a clause for incapacity. If a doctor confirms his memory decline, we can activate the full control clause. I sank into the armchair, my heartbeat oddly calm. Sean was doing exactly what Dale Martinez and I had predicted, but I didn't expect him to be so blatant. For the psychiatrist, I've got a contact. A few tests, a couple of light interviews. Easy. The key is getting him there. Evelyn can convince him. I heard papers flipping on his end. Then Sean continued, his voice firm. "Listen, if we don't act now, it'll be too late. The market's hot. That house could sell for at least $300K profit right now. Letting him linger in it is just wasting the opportunity." I heard a pen signing paper, his tapping on the table. "Yeah, I'll let Evelyn talk first. Make him feel like he has a choice. But if he hesitates, we'll pull the securing the future for the kids card. Old man's bound to soften." A dry laugh rang out. I recognized it. Sean's the man I once called son. I hung up. My hand still gripped the coffee mug handle. The window was still streaked with rain, but I no longer saw the leaf marks. I only saw the jagged lines of trust torn apart by every word, every plot. I opened the laptop, accessed the auto backup software for the phone line. The recording appeared. 19 minutes and 37 seconds long. Clear. Enough to destroy any defense. I saved the file, named it Call Sean Dr. Plot, then sent it to Martinez. Almost instantly, he replied, "This is criminal evidence. It's not just civil anymore." I called back. His voice was low and firm. "Roy, you need to stay completely calm from now until I finalize the filings with the state bar. I'll arrange a neutral psychiatrist to evaluate you first, certifying you're fully competent. Don't go to any doctor," Sean suggests. "No matter what Evelyn says." I agreed. It was time to stop yielding. Not for the money, but for honor, for Maria, and for me. 3 days later, Evelyn came into my room, her eyes slightly tense. She sat on the bed, placed a hand on my knee like she was about to deliver bad news. "Dad," she began, "Sean thinks you should get a light psych eval to check your memory. It's no big deal, just a precaution." I looked straight at her. For the first time I saw it. My daughter, the child who once rode on my back in the summer grass and giggled, was now lying without blinking. "Precaution for what?" I asked. "I still remember every dollar I gave you too, your wedding day, the color of Maria's dress that day. Have I forgotten anything?" Evelyn hesitated but kept her tone gentle. "Don't overthink it, Dad. Lots of people your age forget things. It's just a checkup." "And if the results say I'm showing signs of dementia?" I asked. "Are you two planning to sign everything for me?" She bit her lip. No answer. I nodded, stood, and left the room. I didn't want to say more. I was afraid I'd say something I couldn't take back. I didn't need her confirmation anymore. I'd heard enough, recorded enough, saved enough. That night, I sat alone on the balcony. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. The smell of damp earth reminded me of Sunday mornings weeding the garden with Maria. I pulled out my phone, played the morning's recording through earbuds, and listened silently from the start. Every word from Sean, every cold syllable was another cut to my heart, but also another stone to build my shield. That call, misdialed but perfectly timed, was the point of no return. The bell that brought down the final curtain, and I, the man who once gave everything for a warm home, now knew. Only I could protect myself from those who shared my blood but had colder hearts than strangers. I went to Dale Martinez's office on Monday morning, carrying a box of files weighing nearly 11 pounds and a mindset that had shifted. No more hesitation, no more constant ache like in the early days of discovering the truth. I was no longer the fool sitting at the dinner table waiting to be treated kindly. No longer the father blindly nodding to his daughter and son-in-law's every decision. I was a man with all the evidence in hand and enough clarity to reclaim what was mine. Dale greeted me with the same steady look as our first meeting, but this time, he stood and shook my hand with both of his. "I've listened to all the recordings. We have an extremely solid case." I set the box on the table, opened it. "Here are all the transfer receipts to Evelyn and Sean's accounts over the past 12 years. Copies of the mortgage guarantee, copies of companies Sean registered and dissolved, even a handwritten letter from Evelyn when she borrowed money for home repairs, promising to repay in 6 months. 18 years later, not a cent." Dale flipped through a few pages, nodded. "Very good, but the recordings are the key. His talks about faking incapacity, colluding with a doctor, planning the asset grab that's criminal behavior." I looked at him, voice firm. "I want to block any chance of them transferring the house. Remove Evelyn from all inheritance rights. Cancel every document tied to that trust they drafted." Dale wasn't surprised. "I've prepared a declaration of ineligibility for inheritance under Colorado's Civil Code, Section 15. Also a court motion to confirm your full competency, backed by an independent psychiatrist report from someone I recommended. They won't easily counter this. I also want to update my will," I added. "Strike Evelyn's name entirely. Transfer all assets to a scholarship fund in Maria's name. Not a dime left for anyone who betrays me again." Dale looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Done." We spent over 3 hours reviewing the legal files. I signed each document with steady, strong strokes, not a single tremble. When I left the office, December sunlight hit the sidewalk like there'd never been a winter. The breeze was light, dry, and clear. For the first time in months, my chest felt lighter, like a boulder had been lifted. But I didn't stop there. I went home, into my study, opened the laptop, and began writing a 4-page handwritten letter. Not for the court, not for the lawyer, but for Evelyn. In it, I didn't curse or blame. I just recounted every detail I remembered. The day she was born. The first night Maria and I stayed up because she had a fever. The first bike I bought her. The time she failed a test and I hugged her saying, "It's okay, you're still my daughter." I wrote about skipping lunches for 2 months to afford the prom dress she dreamed of. I mentioned Maria, who saw the worry in my eyes when Evelyn started pulling away, who warned me, "Don't give so much that they forget the value of what they receive." I wrote it all, leaving out no emotion. At the end I wrote one line, "I forgive you, but I can't keep hoping." I slipped the letter into an envelope, left it unsealed, and placed it neatly on the dining table, where I knew Evelyn would see it when she came home. That evening she returned late. I was watering plants in the yard when I saw her car pull up, Sean not with her. I heard the door open, her heels clicking on the wood floor. Then her soft call, "Dad?" I wanted her to have a moment facing the empty house and the letter full of truth. I heard the chair pull out. Silence. Then the rustle of paper. The breeze stirred. Her footsteps grew light, then heavy, then stopped. I came inside just as she stood at my bedroom door. Her eyes were red. "Dad?" I just looked, didn't respond. Not cold, but not warm like before. "I read it," she said. I didn't think it would come to this." I nodded slightly. "It came to this because you thought I didn't know." Her voice trembled. "Sean, I didn't think he'd go that far." I looked into her eyes. "You signed those papers. You lied to me on the phone. You knew, Evelyn. You just didn't think I heard." Silence stretched like a chasm. Then she broke down crying. I said nothing. Didn't push her away. Didn't comfort her either. We stood 3 steps apart, close enough for a hug, but as far as a lifetime. Finally, she stepped back, wiped her tears. "I'm sorry," she said, as if that could mend what was torn. I didn't answer. I went into my room, closed the door softly, didn't lock it, but didn't leave it open either. That night, I slept deeply. In my dream, Maria stood under the maple tree, smiling sadly but peacefully. And for the first time in a long while, I no longer felt like a fool. I started Wednesday morning by pouring a strong cup of coffee, wearing the old dress shirt Maria had ironed for me before my retirement, and stepping out of the house at 7:30 a.m., with a composure I didn't know I still had. The cold, steel-like sunlight hit the stone path I'd laid myself, each brick a memory of aching muscles, each grout line a silent promise. I wouldn't let anyone trample my life without respect. Susan Merrick's office, a neurologist, Dale Martinez, had arranged for an independent evaluation of my mental state and competency. The office was in an old red brick building in South Denver, specializing in guardianship dispute cases. "Mr. Hayes?" the nurse called. I stood, shook hands with the silver-haired doctor, petite but with eyes sharp as a scalpel. We began with memory tests, repeating number sequences, drawing spatial shapes, recalling a short passage. I answered each question clearly, each word precise, as if every response was a slap I wanted to land on Sean's face. Then came the psychological interview. Dr. Merrick asked about my daily habits, self-care, finances, personal relationships. I told her everything, even how I was recording all conversations, storing documents, checking bank transactions weekly. When she asked why, I said, "Because I trusted the wrong people, and I learned to protect myself. Too late for some things, but still in time for the rest." After nearly 2 hours, Dr. Merrick looked at me, a rare smile at the corner of her mouth. "Mr. Hayes, your cognitive capacity is completely normal. In fact, you're sharper than many people I see at your age. I'll send a full report to your lawyer within 24 hours. I shook her hand, left the clinic with a steadier stride than that morning. In the car, I checked my phone. A message from Dale. "Ready for the next step?" I replied. "Proceed." The plan was this. Dale would file a court motion to temporarily freeze all my assets and void the trust documents due to suspected fraud. Simultaneously, we'd send a formal letter to Evelyn and Sean, demanding they immediately cease all attempts to access or manage my assets and legal documents in any form. That evening, I cooked dinner myself. Bacon, fried eggs, and toast. Simple, but it reminded me of the early years when Maria and I first moved into this house, with nothing but love, dreams, and an old wooden dining set from a flea market. While washing dishes, I heard a car pull up. Sean, alone. He didn't knock right away, hesitating as if weighing whether to keep up the act. Then he knocked. I dried my hands, opened the door. "Dad," he said, his voice lower, lacking its usual slick charm. "Evelyn said you're upset about the trust. If there's a misunderstanding, I want to clear it up." I tilted my head, letting him see the calm in my eyes. "Come in." He stepped inside, scanning the living room as if noticing details for the first time. My and Maria's wedding photo, the worn armchair, the rug I bought in Santa Fe. I didn't offer him a seat. "We just want to help you," he started, his tone softening further. "You have to know we're sincere, but if you don't want to proceed, that's fine too, as long as everything stays stable." "Stable?" I echoed, my lips curling slightly. "Like how you lied about the trust, or how you planned to hire a doctor to fake a dementia diagnosis for your father-in-law." He froze. For the first time, I saw panic in his eyes. "Dad, what did you hear?" "Everything." I pulled a black USB from my pocket, set it on the coffee table. "The recording from Saturday morning's call. 19 minutes, 37 seconds. Your voice clear as glass." He reached for it. I stopped him. "No need. 1 copy's with my lawyer. 1's at the bank. 1 I keep." His face paled, lips pressed tight. I stepped closer, my voice low but each word like a hammer. I know you only ever wanted to use me. I know Evelyn's not entirely innocent. But I played along long enough to let you two tie your own noose, and now I'm pulling it." Sean stepped back, speechless. I opened the door. "Get out." He stood still for a moment, then turned and walked out, his silhouette shrinking under the yellow porch light, the light I'd installed, hoping someone would come home each night. That was the first counterstrike. Not to scare Sean, but to remind him. I'd been silent, but never ignorant, and from the moment he crossed that threshold, the game was no longer his. I didn't expect things to turn so decisively in my favor until Sean left his phone on the dining table. That morning he came alone, saying he wanted to clear up misunderstandings after the night I'd kicked him out. Evelyn wasn't with him, and his tone was restrained, no longer the slick, cunning charm, but the cautious attempt of someone facing an unclimbable wall. He brought a box of pastries, the kind Evelyn used to buy from the French bakery in the Southside Mall, and a bottle of wine I'd given him his first year as my son-in-law. I touched neither. We talked for about 15 minutes. He beat around the bush, still trying to steer me back to the trust plan, emphasizing it was not now but something to consider for the future. I just listened, didn't react, didn't deny, just nodded a few times like a tired old father too weary to argue. Then his phone buzzed. Sean stood, excused himself to the bathroom, leaving the phone on the table, screen still lit, showing a new message. Sent the forged contract. Delete the email after signing. Careful, his lawyer's watching closely. I didn't need time to think. In under 3 seconds, I grabbed his phone, took it to the mini photocopier hidden in a kitchen cabinet, a model with screen scanning and auto email features. 1 button, 3 screenshots sent straight to my encrypted inbox, the full message thread, attached email images, titled, "Trust Amendment, Fake Signature Ready." I returned the phone to its spot just as Sean came back, his face unsuspecting. I looked at him, gave a faint smile. "I need more time. Leave the papers here. When I'm ready, I'll sign." Sean nodded, almost too eagerly. Of course, Dad. I understand." He shook my hand, muttered something about respecting elders' decisions, then left, leaving a faint cologne scent in the living room like a trace of his deceit. I closed the door, returned to the table, opened the laptop. In my inbox, the 3 images were clear. The message exchange about the forged contract, the document with my name but a fake signature, and a note from his partner, "Wrap it up this week. Don't let him suspect." I sent all files to Dale Martinez with a short note. The phone left behind gave more evidence. Less than an hour later, he called. "This is gold, Roy. A direct fraud exchange, forged signature evidence, and intent to cover tracks. I'm contacting the prosecutor now." That afternoon, I went to the bank, the branch where I'd opened a joint credit account with Evelyn 11 years ago, back when I thought my daughter would always be my rock. I requested to revoke her access and transfer all funds to a new account in my name only. The banker took a few minutes to verify, then glanced at me, eyes hesitant. "Are you sure? Your daughter called this morning to check the account status." I nodded. "I'm sure. From now on, no one sees anything except me and my lawyer. Here's the competency certification and account privacy request." I left the bank with a copy of the documents in hand, feeling like I'd closed an old dusty book and opened a new page. Blank, cold but clean. That evening, Evelyn called. Her voice shook. "Dad, Sean says you're suspicious of a lot. Can you share with me?" I paused, then said, "I'll share with the court." Evelyn choked up. I heard her stifle a sob. I didn't comfort her. I just hung up, not waiting for her to say more. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be resolute and necessary. An hour later, Sean called, but this time I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the legal file management app, checked off another item. Evidence from target's personal device complete. I sat alone in my study, the room now a hub of evidence, color-coded papers, financial statements, recordings, scans, and a timeline charting every abuse, every attempt at theft. The forgotten phone, maybe Sean's first slip or overconfidence. But whatever it was, it nailed the legal coffin he and Evelyn were sitting in. And I, the father who once stayed silent, who gave everything just to see his daughter smile, had turned my home into a fortress. No one entered anymore without leaving a trace. No one deceived me without being recorded. And no one could take what I still held, unless I chose to let go. And I wasn't ready to let go. Not now. Not after all I'd seen. I chose a Saturday evening for a family dinner. Evelyn replied to my text instantly, seemingly relieved that I'd reached out. "Sean and I will bring an appetizer. I still have Mom's lasagna recipe." I texted back. "Good. I'll handle the main course." 6 o'clock. No emoji. No heart. No cheerful promise. I started cleaning the dining table that afternoon, wiping every edge, changing the tablecloth, relighting the candles. The house looked like past reunions, except this time, I wasn't expecting warmth. I was preparing for a confrontation. Each plate, each wine glass was set precisely. Not to welcome guests, but to prove I was still the one in control. At 6 sharp, Sean's car pulled up. He wore a wool coat, hair neatly combed, carrying a basket with wine and bread. Evelyn walked beside him, lips smiling but eyes betraying tension. I opened the door, nodded. Come in. No one spoke much while setting out the food. Evelyn placed the lasagna tray on the table, trying to act natural. Sean poured wine, his hand trembling slightly. I let them be for a few minutes, then sat in my usual spot at the head of the table where I'd been pushed aside for years. To us, I said, raising my glass. Evelyn hesitated. Sean clinked his glass lightly, avoiding my eyes. We started eating, no one touching the main course I'd made, braised beef ribs and red wine. A dish Maria once said was better than any Italian restaurant. Evelyn gave a perfunctory compliment. Sean stayed silent. I waited until the meal was halfway through, when the yellow table lamp cast the clearest light on their faces, and when they started thinking they might get through the evening unscathed. I stood, took a thick white envelope from the cabinet, and placed it on the table between the steaming lasagna dishes. What's this, Dad? Evelyn asked. I didn't answer right away. I sat back down slowly, pouring a bit more wine into my glass. In here, I began, is a recording of Sean's call with his partner about forging asset transfer documents, screenshots of texts about a fake contract, bank statements showing you and Sean withdrew over $600,000 from my accounts over 12 years. Evelyn froze. Sean lunged for the envelope, but I pulled it back. No rush, this is a copy. The originals are with my lawyer. One set's with the prosecutor, another at the bank. If you two think about burning the house or doing something stupid, it won't erase the evidence. Dad, Evelyn whispered, you're misunderstanding everything. Am I? I tilted my head. Then who suggested faking a diagnosis of my incapacity? Who signed the second mortgage knowing I couldn't pay? And who sent the email telling me don't ask too much? Let Sean handle it. Sean stood. Someone's manipulating you. Sit down. My voice was ice. I've heard enough from you. From the day you walked into my house with that fake smile to today, I've recorded every word you said, every scheme, every call. I stayed silent. And you thought I was a fool. But no, I was just waiting for today. The air turned heavy. Evelyn looked at me, eyes red. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far. Sean promised. Promised what? I cut her off. That you'd get the house in your name? That you'd never worry about money again? That I'd get old and forget everything? You planned well. Evelyn buried her face, tears falling onto her plate. Sean tried to salvage it. You can forgive us. We're family. No one has to go to court if you want to settle privately. I stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out 2 more envelopes, one labeled Revocation of Evelyn Hayes's Inheritance Rights, the other, Motion to Void All Authorized Transactions with Sean Walters. I placed them on the table, one in front of each. Here's the choice, I said slowly. 1. Sign these. Withdraw from all assets. Cut all ties. 2. I proceed with prosecution. With all the evidence, I guarantee you'll not only lose everything but end up in jail. The room was silent as a graveyard. Finally, Sean bowed his head. He signed. Evelyn's hand shook, lips pressed tight. Then she signed too. I collected the papers, folded them carefully into the folder, said nothing more. Dinner ended in silence. Evelyn grabbed her coat, left without looking back. Sean followed, his face pale as chalk. I closed the door, locked it. The wind blew through the porch, stirring the curtains Maria had sewn. I stood in the dark for a long while, hearing their car fade into the distance. No more anger, no more pain, just the quiet I'd traded all my trust to reclaim. I walked to my study, took out an old bottle of wine, poured a glass. Raising it, I said softly, to you, Maria, because I finally remembered who I am. I sat in my study, the desk lamp casting long, distorted shadows on the wall, like the thoughts in my head. Outside, a light rain fell. The house, after the family meeting, remained intact. But I wasn't. I'd won. I'd made them sign. I'd stopped the hands reaching for my wallet and dignity, but I didn't feel satisfied. I felt empty. The worst pain wasn't the money lost, but Evelyn's eyes as she signed away her inheritance. Eyes not of someone deceived, but of someone who knew from the start and chose silence. My phone buzzed. The text from Evelyn, "Can I see you for a bit?" Alone? I didn't reply. 15 minutes later, a car stopped outside. No knock, no call, just the familiar sound of soft footsteps. Then a faint knock, 3 taps, the way she used to do as a 4-year-old afraid of waking her mother. I opened the door. Evelyn stood there in a raincoat, hair wet, no makeup, no pretense. Her eyes were swollen, and she held a crumpled paper. "Dad," she said. I tilted my head, stepped back. She walked in without waiting for an invitation. We sat across from each other in the living room, where all the important talks in this house had happened. Maria used to sit in that chair, wrapped in a blanket, listening to my construction site stories. Evelyn used to study here, sprawled on the rug, marker in hand. Now, just 2 people. a father who'd lost trust, and a daughter who could no longer hide. You know, don't you? Evelyn asked. I didn't answer. She nodded, placed the paper on the table. This is a copy of the email Sean sent his partner about the forged contract. The one I also received. I stayed silent. I got it 2 weeks ago, she continued, her voice trembling but steady. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything. I didn't stop him, because I thought, if it worked, we wouldn't be drowning in debt anymore. I was tired. I looked at her, not with anger but with the eyes of someone who once hoped. You knew he planned to forge my signature, knew he wanted to declare me incompetent, and you said nothing. Evelyn bowed her head. I know, I was wrong. She exhaled, each word like a blade cutting against her chest. I knew I had to stop. I meant to speak up, but I was scared. Scared of Sean, scared of losing everything, scared I'd be left with the debt and a baby growing inside me. I blinked. A baby? She nodded. 3 months. I leaned back, looking at the ceiling where I'd strung Christmas lights years ago when Maria was alive. A grandchild, a life that knew nothing, owed nothing. I felt forced to flip the chessboard even though the last game had just ended. Evelyn said slowly, Sean doesn't know. He thinks I'm still on his side. But after the meeting, I moved out, back to my old apartment. I cut all contact. I know I don't deserve to be your daughter, but I looked at her, didn't speak, just looked, and she understood she didn't need to beg forgiveness, because what was lost couldn't be regained with words. You knew I was recording, knew I kept documents, saw how careful I was with every detail. Sometimes, you were scared, because I wasn't the easygoing old man you thought you could sway anymore. I said, my voice oddly calm. I didn't change. I just stopped hoping for what you never wanted to keep. I was wrong, but I never stopped loving you. I nodded slightly. But love isn't enough. If you love without protecting, without speaking up, that love isn't salvation, it's an excuse. We sat quietly for a while. The rain softened outside the window. Evelyn clutched her scarf, eyes unfocused. I stood, went to the study, took a paper from the drawer. Will amendment request. I placed it on the table in front of her. There's 1 week left before the deadline. Evelyn looked at me, eyes brimming. Dad, I raised a hand, cutting her off. I'm not promising anything. A child's coming. It's not at fault, but I need time, not to forget, but to know if I can start again. She nodded, said nothing, didn't beg, just sat there, as if awaiting a verdict, though the verdict wasn't read aloud, only signed in silence. Evelyn left in the rain. I didn't see her out. I just stood by the window watching her car disappear down the wet road. In my heart were 100 shards of a broken fatherhood, and somewhere amid the wreckage, a faint spark of hope I wasn't sure I had the strength to hold. But I knew one thing. If that child was born tomorrow, it wouldn't carry its parents' debts. Not under my roof, not under my name. If there was anything I could still save, I'd save it with reason, not emotion, because I'd loved wrongly once. I didn't want to be wrong again. The trial was set for January 14 at the Denver District Court. The air was freezing, snow blanketing the gray stone steps to the heavy oak doors. I wore my old suit, a black tie, and the wool coat Maria bought for our 30th anniversary. In my hand was a black leather briefcase holding everything: audio evidence, printed emails, financial records, the psychiatrist's report, and the inheritance revocation declaration. I entered the courtroom like walking into a funeral, not for a person, but for trust. Sean sat across the room, clean-shaven, crisp white shirt, his face trying to hold confidence but unable to hide the exhaustion under his eyes. Beside him was his lawyer, a young man, composed but constantly exchanging glances with his client. Evelyn wasn't there. She'd submitted a statement, fully accepting my demands and withdrawing from the proceedings. I didn't know if it came from remorse or exhaustion, but I respected her choice. The judge, a woman named Langford with silver hair and a voice sharp as a blade, called for the audio file after Dale Martinez, my lawyer, gave his opening statement. The room fell so quiet I could hear the earbuds being plugged into the computer speaker. Then Sean's voice rang out, unmistakable. Once the trust is in hand, I'll handle it all. Sell the house, liquidate, transfer everything to the new company. He won't know a thing. A sharp emphasis, a sigh, a scornful laugh. In under 5 minutes, the recording tore apart the devoted son-in-law image he'd built. Sean's lawyer tried to argue lack of context, claiming people exaggerate in conversation, and no actual transfer occurred. But when Dale presented the text message screenshots, the forged contract with a fake signature, and a third-party statement confirming they were hired to pose as a psychiatrist, the room seemed to hold its breath. It was too clear. This was no longer an asset dispute. It was an organized fraud scheme with criminal elements. Judge Langford flipped through the file, her eyes lingering longest on the email excerpt from Evelyn to Sean. Dad doesn't need to know. I told him it's for our investment. She looked up straight at Sean. Mr. Walters, this court finds your actions intentional, organized, and aimed at defrauding an elderly person through deception. You abused a familial relationship to gain trust, then sought to strip financial control through distorted legal instruments. Sean bowed his head. He had no defense left. His lawyer sat silent. The ruling came swiftly. Full control of all assets returned to me. All transactions involving Sean and Evelyn's interference were voided. Sean was ordered to repay $643,720 in misappropriated funds, plus a criminal fine. The case was referred to the DA for potential prosecution on serious elder fraud charges, carrying up to 5 years in prison under Colorado law. I stood after the verdict, unhurried. I looked at Sean one last time. No anger, no triumph, just the gaze of someone who'd given everything and now faced raw truth. He didn't meet my eyes. I left the courtroom, stepping into the biting cold, the wind whipping my face like a knife, but I felt lighter than ever. Local media reported 2 days later. A news site's headline read, 71-year-old father wins lawsuit against son-in-law's fraud. Recordings key evidence. I shut the computer after reading that line. Didn't need to read more. I didn't do this to be a hero. I did it to protect myself, after trusting the wrong people too long. A week later, Evelyn sent a handwritten letter. Not to apologize, but to say she'd moved to a small town in southern Colorado, working at a pharmacy, and planning to keep the baby. I'll take responsibility, she wrote. If one day you want to meet your granddaughter, I won't stop you. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer. I didn't know if I had enough forgiveness to do that. But at least now I was the one who got to choose. The house I feared losing was quiet again. Truly quiet. No hurried heels, no strange cologne, no pretend meals. I cooked alone, read alone, tended the backyard garden where Maria once planted purple lavender and said they need sun but also need to be left alone. I'm leaving my life alone. After the storm, after the battle, I won't let anyone else write my final chapter. Won't let anyone speak for what's right. And above all, never let kindness become an excuse for others to drain me to the bone. Each morning I wake at 6, brew coffee, and open the window to the backyard where Maria and I laid the first stone for the lavender bed in 1989. Now alone, I tend it as if she's still beside me, one hand in the soil, the other holding a steaming tea mug. No one forces me to do these things. No expectations from anyone. And I don't live in resentment. I live in memory, not to cling, but to remind myself I've loved, sacrificed, and been betrayed. But I'm still here, still alive, and I don't forget. By March, the snow began to melt. Sparrows returned, perching on the eaves, chirping sounds that reminded me of springs long ago when Evelyn was little, running to the yard shouting for me whenever she found a new bird's nest. The scene's the same, only the people have changed. I'm no longer the father ready to sign any paper my daughter hands me. I'm the man who learned love can't be a tool for others to wield. You only get to love when you honor it, not when you use it to buy silence. I kept all the evidence from the lawsuit, not out of fear, but because I know some memories need storing, so when I weaken, I remember how far I sank and how I stood back up. Every recording, email, legal document now rests in a locked metal box in the corner of my study's cabinet. On the lid, I taped a note, not for revenge, to never forget. Some afternoons, I sit on the porch, watching sunlight slant through bare branches, rereading Maria's old letters. She once wrote, "If I'm gone one day, promise you'll live true to yourself. Don't soften for those who don't deserve it." I forgot that for too long. I let fear of loss make me retreat, until I was pushed to the edge, and that's how I remembered who I am. Evelyn hasn't contacted me since her letter. I know she's living in Glenwood Springs, working as a pharmacy cashier, renting a one-bedroom, raising her child alone. Dale Martinez mentioned she asked about the child's inheritance if I passed. I told him to tell her, "Your father's not dead, and he's still lucid enough to decide the rest of his life." I drafted a new will. My assets will fund a scholarship in Maria's name for low-income women studying nursing, her profession. I didn't create it for fame. I did it to birth something good from old wounds. And because if I've learned anything, it's that blood doesn't always mean shared values. One late April day, while sweeping leaves on the porch, the mail truck stopped. The carrier handed me a small package, no sender's name. Inside was a green tin box. I opened it to find a necklace, the one I gave Evelyn at 16, with a small silver heart pendant engraved. "Love you for you," with it a handwritten note. I couldn't keep it, but I couldn't throw it away. "I hope one day you'll give it to my daughter." I read the note over and over. No tears. No surge of emotion, just a faint sting like brushing an old scar. Though unspoken, I understood Evelyn was doing the only thing she could, acknowledging, not for forgiveness but to reclaim a piece of herself not entirely lost. I placed the necklace in a small wooden box, stored it in the drawer with Maria's last letter. I don't know how long I have left. I'm 71, not sick but not strong. Each morning I walk 3 loops around the park, my legs slower than before, but I keep going. I don't hide in the house. Don't fear the past. I face it daily, as an inseparable part. A new neighbor moved in, Clara, a widow with 2 grown kids living far away, who loves planting roses. Sometimes she brings me pastries or an afternoon tea. We don't talk much, just sit quietly on the porch, listening to the wind, occasionally mentioning small things. I'm not looking for a replacement for anyone. I just value what can still live without hurting. Clara's presence proves there are still simple, clean things in life. In June, I received an unsigned card. Inside, an ultrasound photo. Neat handwriting. I'll name her Maria. I sat in my chair, staring at the black and white image for a long time. A small form, face unclear, knowing nothing of right or wrong, untouched by the wounds adults leave. I don't know if I'll meet her. Don't know if I'll have time to give her that silver necklace. But I know one thing. If I get to hold her, I'll look into her eyes and say, your grandfather isn't perfect, but he lived a life learning from pain. I don't expect her to understand or forgive on her mother's behalf. I just hope she grows up in truth, not in false shells of family, not in morality built on silence, but a painful, clear truth, so she can choose a life not to atone for others, but to avoid their mistakes. And I, if I live to see that day, will reach out to hold her small hand. Gently, no pressure, no clinging, but enough for her to know her grandfather fell, lost everything, but stood back up, and is still alive, and never forgets. The story my daughter's husband tried to scam me, but he didn't know I was recording everything, is a stark reflection of very real issues in the U.S. today, financial elder abuse, especially within families. According to the National Council on Aging, millions of older Americans are exploited by relatives through legal-seeming tactics like powers of attorney, trusts, or, for the common good, asset transfers. In the story, Roy Hayes, a devoted father, became the target of his own daughter and son-in-law. Evelyn and Sean didn't use force or threats, but exploited his trust, love, and fear of loneliness to try to seize his home, savings, and control over his life. What makes the story haunting isn't just the fraud, but Evelyn's silence, knowing but not stopping it. This shows that silence in the face of wrong is a form of betrayal. The lesson: family ties don't exempt morality or responsibility. In today's America, older adults should be encouraged to use legal tools to protect themselves, recording, keeping evidence, consulting lawyers, and not signing anything unclear. At the same time, younger generations must understand, love isn't built on blind sacrifice from those before them. It must be nurtured with honesty, transparency, and the courage to defend what's right, even when the wrongdoer is someone dear. Otherwise, family bonds become chains, strangling the freedom and dignity of those who gave everything. If this story made you rethink trust and self-protection, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for listening to the end. See you in the next video, where we'll keep exploring the painful but necessary truths.